December 3rd, 2024. Well, I wanted to get into the back to U.S. politics and sort of economic issues related to that, the domestic issues and our trade relationships, I guess. First of all, let's look at the election outcome where we are right now. Um, we have one House seat that's still a little bit in play. In fact, I was just about to totally give up on it as California 13, and yet we've moved from being maybe 200 votes down to maybe 143 the last I checked. So maybe there's still hope. I don't know, or maybe there would be a recount. I'm not too optimistic. Once in California, once you get into these curing of ballots things, and the Democrats get the lead, it's not good news. So we'll see. But we have 220 House seats wins. The Democrats have 214 confirmed, and there's this California 13 still in play, although I think the odds are still probably heading that the Democrats will flip that seat. I hope they don't, but I mean, just looking at the counts, and it's California and their kind of screwy election system, that's what kind of happens sometimes. So we'll see. On the Senate side, we have 53 senators to 47, but remember, we also have a couple of pretty much first-class moderates there, or last class, I don't know how to put them. I mean, Murkowski and Collins. And my attitude on that always is we should be happy we have Collins, and we really wish we had somebody like Murkowski. Because, I mean, Alaska could easily produce a solid conservative senator for us. So there, you don't need to have a moderate to win. But for Maine, I think if you're going to win the state of Maine, you need somebody kind of like a Collins. It's still useful to keep the majority, just to have more members on the committees and, you know, a more solid majority to keep control. A lot is done just having control of the Senate, where the leader can decide what comes up to a vote or not, you know, which is very important, even if you have somebody there that most of the time doesn't vote with you. But in the House, it becomes more precarious right now. Assuming this turns out the way it looks right now, we will have a 5-vote majority, but the problem is, of course, Gates has resigned over apparently because he doesn't want his ethics report to come out, and he obviously is not going to get to be Attorney General. That was pretty minimal chance. And you have 2 other people, Stefanik and Waltz, who have been slated to take key positions in the incoming Trump administration. So the result, that puts us down to, for a significant period of time, to 217 votes, which means all it takes is one defector from the Republicans and the bill doesn't pass, whatever that might be, anything we're trying to do, a tax cut or anything you might want to do, it won't pass if one person defects. So you have to have unanimity in the Republican Party to get anything done in this circumstance. And I can recall from the last Congress, we didn't have unanimity, right? Although some of the troublemakers are gone and some of them are still there, and maybe they've been disciplined a little bit by their experiences to realize it wasn't a good idea to do some of the things they were doing. But we'll have to see how that pans out. But that's kind of the situation. So in other words, major Trump legislation probably is going to have to wait for a while, unless they can keep everybody on board, and certainly the tax cuts are a big part of that needs to go through Congress. A lot of things he can do with executive orders, but the tax cuts are going to have to go through Congress and probably be done through a complex process called reconciliation, if you've heard of that before. So because I mean, you're not going to get I don't think you're going to get 60 votes for cloture in the Senate. So therefore, it will probably have to go through reconciliation, and that becomes somewhat more complex, especially with such a slim majority. So if you like these videos, please give me a like, subscribe, and of course, you click the bell for notifications, or you can follow me on Rumble, of which I got the information below on how to do that. This is the predicament. While it is a win, and certainly having the presidency is a big win, and the Senate's a big win, because that will allow us to appoint get people confirmed to most of the appointed positions. We may have some opposition to some of the people because Trump has definitely decided to go with, let's say, a provocative group of people in some places. Not that they're bad, but I mean, I, I do like Kash Patel for FBI director. That sounds very interesting. Uh, I mean, he might root out some of the bad guys there and find out, how many informants there really were on January the 6th and things of that sort. And maybe a whole bunch of other stuff that was going on. And so that's interesting. Of course, Pete Hegseth on the, I mentioned that before on that. So that's otherwise, I think we're in pretty good shape on most of them. Um, and so, but the other issue we're going to be facing is, of course, for one thing, on the border with Mexico. I mean, Trump has already unleashed his Trump has unleashed his tariff weapon, threatening 25% tariffs on Canada and Mexico. Um, the Mexican tariffs are probably largely directed to pressure them, of course, on the border problem, the mass immigration, the great, you know, convoys of people coming through, and also the all the fentanyl problems. Now, so that I personally don't quite get the attitude on Canada at all. I don't know where that's coming from. There is a trade deficit, but for the most part, the trade deficit with Canada largely is that Canada produces a lot of natural resources that our industry uses. I mean, and including, petroleum and all sorts of minerals and so forth. And I think agricultural products, food. And so I'm like, all right, if you put a tariff of 25% on that, all you're doing is just running up the price that people will be paying for the manufactured and processed goods that would come out of those inputs. In so much as it's manufactured, say a car or something like that, or anything like that, okay, you could say, well, maybe that would be made in the U.S. instead. But we're dealing with just natural resources, and the actual illegal immigration across the Canadian border, while it does exist, is minuscule compared to what's coming across the Mexican border. I mean, orders of magnitude more on the Mexican border. So I'm not sure quite why he's trying to rough up Trudeau that much, but we'll see how that pans out. I'm kind of curious how this is all going to pan out. Is also apparently attacking the BRICS nations, was threatening them with a 100% tariff. And if that were to happen, remember, we're talking about, I joke around almost the whole world. No, not really, but I mean, I don't think Russia cares. We're not trading much with them anyhow. But you're dealing with China, India, and Brazil, and look at those populations. That's quite a few people. Uh, and I don't know that the other smaller countries that are similar conditions. China really isn't a third world country exactly anymore like it used to be. I don't say it's first world, but it's kind of broaching something at this point. And even India, all these countries, are developing quite a bit beyond maybe our traditional thought processes on them. And so, and of course, South Africa, well, yeah, but there's a bunch of other countries that are interested. I don't know, maybe he will be able to deter the BRICS and break it up that way. I guess that's what he's attempting to do. We'll see how that plays out. I mean, that's a major initiative. And so we're looking at the whole thing, though, is like, what does this ultimately lead to? I mean, we know he was talking in these terms, but it looks like, for instance, China, for example, I would say, China has their eye on Taiwan, as we know, and that's one of the major security issues is how do you keep China from taking Taiwan? And the general thought was, well, one reason is, well, we have a military capability, obviously. But the other factor is if they were to do it, obviously that would lead to a major trade embargo against China, right? And perhaps even a naval blockade. I mean, well, if you keep your navy back far enough and just prevent ships from going in there, he'd be outside the range of the anti-ship missiles that they're talking about, and we could probably do that. Now we get in too close, and we might lose some major naval combatants. So that's where, but you know, the economic trade sanctions and would be very likely just like what happened with Russia, you know, maybe more severe. But there you are. I mean, if you hit them with too many tariffs ahead of time and put too many restrictions on who they can trade with and what they can do, like for instance, you can't buy oil from Iran anymore and things like that, who knows what, they may very well make the opposite conclusion that it's game on. I mean, you know, we're going to do the war sometime in the next couple of 3 years. Why not go ahead and do it in 2025? After all, I think there was one Air Force general a few years ago that predicted that's when it would happen anyhow. I don't know if he was speaking out of school or not. I don't think he lost his position over it, and said everybody had to be prepared for it. So, I mean, and now we're getting toward that date, and you know, if they were able to embargo all the shipments of semiconductors out of Taiwan, that would be a major blow to our economy and our technology developments. While there is some effort to develop duplicate capabilities, that will take years, and in the meantime, well, so, you know, it's hard to know. And a similar, I mean, this interesting comment about that he's demanding that all the hostages be released by the time he's inaugurated, I guess somewhat similar to Reagan having the embassy staff from Tehran being released before he took in. And we don't know exactly why that happened, but it may be that they were looking for you know, they might have been mortally afraid of what Reagan was going to do, or maybe they simply had enough of it anyhow and figured that the inauguration would be a good way to maybe, you know, put out a, you know, easing of tensions or something. Maybe, I don't know. Who knows? There was even a conspiracy theory about that a few years ago, if you're familiar. So that gives you an idea of what that would be. I don't know. And now, right now, of course, I read too much into that in this video, but there is an ongoing, I'd say, U.S.-sponsored effort, CIA operation with some jihadists who are actually attacking the Syrian positions in northern Syria, you know, right at this time, and which is interesting. This is the same ideological group that did 9/11, you know, and now we're supporting them against the Assad faction because the Assad faction is back with the Russians. So as I'd said earlier in a video sometime back about horizontal escalation that Russia might do, well, it looks like the U.S. is now doing some counter horizontal escalation against the Russians. But right now, again, there's a possibility that I hear there's been some airstrikes against Iranian assets, probably in Iraq. So, and remember, Iran has promised another counterstrike against Israel, which hasn't happened yet because they're deterred from doing it because of what happened to them last time, or who knows? Are they waiting to get their nuclear bomb made or not? Or are they actually making a nuclear bomb? Or have they even tested it secretly or not? You know, I did see that on one of the videos I watched that we did have one of our so-called sniffer planes flying into the area recently. It's hard to know whether those were just earthquakes or whether they were something else. But again, that's not been resolved yet publicly, and as of now, the U.S. government has not, as far as I know, has not commented on it at all. So this could turn into something unexpected, escalation that could occur at any time between now and the inauguration. And so, and again, you now have an actual formal alliance between Russia and Iran, which you didn't have the last time that we put the screws, if you will, on Iran. So we don't know how Russia will react, how China will react, because they're kind of working a little bit in concert. Well, China's trying to lay low and say, okay, we're going to kind of listen to your sanctions and all. It does seem like in an underground way, they're still supporting the Russian effort in Ukraine while trying to pretend like they're neutral and really not involved at all. But maybe that's not the real attitude. So these are the kind of things that are playing into and it does intermix with our economic plans, and we'll have to see how this ends. But you know, one of Trump's promises was the end inflation. Well, we could very well rekindle it if we get into too many tariff disputes. If, on the other hand, the tariff threats are an effective deterrent, and they react to it the way we want, and the tariff never actually happens, or is a very minimal tariff, then that won't have much of an economic impact, of course. But if there is a big tariff, and particularly if we get involved in it with several major trading partners, that could have an adverse effect on our own economy. So these are things to consider, the kind of tightrope that Trump should be walking here as he carefully makes the strategic moves here on the economic front. So anyway, that's kind of the way I see it right now. There's a lot up in the air as what's going to happen. Personally, I actually think that we ought to tell, like, for instance, Stefanik particularly, that we'd love to have had her as UN ambassador, but let's not do that at this time. One option that might be, because the special election for Matt Gaetz, the replacement, can be scheduled at the convenience of the governor of California, DeSantis. I apologize. Florida. Florida. I know I was just thinking one thing. I was thinking about 13, DeSantis of Florida. And so he can do that on an expeditious basis. But on the other hand, the governor of New York will have a discretion to delay up to 90 days before they schedule anything. And that'll leave the seat open. And during that period, again, we'll have a very slim majority to hold the House and get some legislation. It's probably going to have some controversies in it, I mean, because, like some of the Republicans want, for instance, the salt taxes to be restored, the salt deductions. The other people just want to keep the rates as low as possible. And so there's inherent conflict within the caucus, which is very thin. So I think that what he could do is appoint the deputy ambassador of the UN and leave her in place at least until Gaetz is replaced with somebody. And I don't know, Waltz, I mean, again, I'm kind of like, okay, Waltz is okay, nothing against him, but is it that critical? I think he's more critical to be in the Senate, the House seat right now, that is to bring him over to National Security Advisor. I'm sure there's many other qualified people that could do that job. I don't see a House member who was a colonel in the Special Forces, but I don't think that's a unique skill set to be the National Security Advisor looking at the overall geostrategic issue, but we'll see. But I guess if they could stagger those, I mean, he could still stay in the House and actually be a National Security Advisor in principle, but not formally. That is, he'd be still collecting a House salary and be a House member. But when he's not actually voting, he could be over to the NSC, working with them. Maybe is that possible? And that way we could keep these people in there to at least we could stagger the replacements one by one over a period of time, and eventually get them all in, and not drop the numbers down as low, and maybe keep at least an 18 to 15 vote, where we'd have to have two defectors. At any rate, that's the concerns I have. That's the way I see it. I think that maybe Trump made those appointments before he realized how the election was going to turn out in the House, because I think we were hoping to get up to 223 seats, and we probably didn't expect the Gaetz thing to end up the way it did either. So, anyway, that's about the way I see the situation on the domestic front and the economic front, and a little bit of geostrategic stuff. So I'll be posting this on YouTube and Rumble as always, and the addresses of my social media accounts are in the description below. I post most frequently short comments on X about a lot of things. Some are supposed to be comical. I hope you appreciate my sense of humor at times. Some of them are more substantive. It varies. So that's all for this time.